So we did have that breaking news for you just over an hour ago. The Sean Diddy Combs trial, and Sean Diddy Combs has been acquitted of the most serious charges in his federal criminal trial. Racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking were those more serious charges, but was found guilty on 2 counts of transporting individuals for prostitution. The mixed verdict means the music mogul, who's now 55 years old, faces up to 20 years in prison. The judge is considering whether to release him on bond while awaiting sentencing. Both sides expected to submit their positions shortly. Prosecutors arguing Combs poses a risk and should remain in custody, while the defense insists he should be freed under strict conditions. Let's go to Ari Goldkind now, criminal lawyer, legal expert. He's on the line. Ari, welcome back to the show.
Good to be with you again.
Obviously, there's been a bit of media circus around this trial because of who it involves. How have you seen this trial play out?
Well, look, I always, Elias, believe you follow the money. Mm-hmm. It applies to everything in life, from politics to the courts to civil lawsuits. And you cannot have a conversation about this verdict and what it means and what it represents and how it's going to be spun. And we can talk about the spin of it and what should happen to Diddy without realizing that Cassie Ventura, the woman at the center of all of this, received a $20 million payout, $20 million, from Sean Combs for her troubles. That is something that most people don't know because it's a detail that has been buried in the reporting about this case. The verdict now, which was the one they were split on over the weekend, you'll recall they had verdicts on everything. Then they needed a bit more time on the serious one. The fact that he has been acquitted on the more serious charges, this is a huge win for him. So while you're going to see the prosecution spin this a little bit, and her lawyer, Cassie Ventura's lawyer, is now on CNN as we speak, trying to spin the verdict a little bit, this is a gigantic win for Sean Combs and suggests, which his lawyers have advanced, that this was a gross overreach by the prosecution. We've seen this before in the charge racketeering, Elias. I mean, for you and I who are old enough to watch The Sopranos, the term racketeering was really a term that was meant to deal with organized crime, but it's been used so often in these kinds of cases. And then the question becomes later today at around 1 p.m., will the judge free Sean Combs? And we can talk about that too if you'd like.
Yeah, well, I mean, what do you think? Will the judge? Because he's facing 20 years in prison. Now, I don't know if when I say that he's facing 20 years, if people convicted of these actually do get 20 years, or that's a very unusual circumstance where they get that full sentence.
The reason that's such a great question, Elias, is because we're talking in Canada. Yeah. We're talking, well, you can probably guess where I'm going.
Yeah.
In Canada, you don't even get 20 years half the time for causing the deaths of people, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And here he's got that sword of Damocles over his head. I don't think he should be looking at another day in jail. If you look at what he's actually being convicted of, his pretrial custody, remember, he was detained pending this trial. He was considered such a risk to flee because of his assets and such that he's being holed up in, the same detention centers that, murderers and rapists and all of these other people are. So he has served a very significant period of pretrial custody, which should completely satisfy the sentence. So that 20-year number, if it happens, it'll be appealed in 2 seconds. He's not going to get anywhere near that, particularly, and this is important, because he won so significantly on the most serious charges.
Gotcha. And those 2 counts that he's found guilty on, transporting individuals
Correct.
for prostitution. I'm just like, what? There's because he's not
he
guilty
gave
on
him a ride.
Well, that's it. I was like, what was he the Uber driver? Like, what does that mean?
As long as that, this is what they've done with R. Kelly. This is why I made that Sopranos comment. This is the way they prosecuted Trump. They're trying to show some criminal organization. Meanwhile, particularly if you fly somebody across states, that's the biggest sin you can often do in the States. Is it's one thing if you keep everything in New Jersey, but if you fly from New Jersey to Minneapolis,
federal crime.
Now it becomes I'm not going to make a joke, but it becomes something that it really shouldn't be because it's one country. So he's bringing people to his freak-offs, and the jury probably said, well, look, we can't. I'm not even sure his defense lawyers all, quite frankly, cared about that one the way they did the others. So to me, it is in what my business is called as a defense lawyer. Those are very poochy charges and poochy convictions. And remember, different for anybody who hears me say that and goes, he's minimizing prostitution and No. This is totally different than coercing, forcing, pressuring, taking a young person against their will. That is not what he's being convicted of here. He was acquitted of those kinds of things. So anybody who thinks I'm minimizing the very real problem of human trafficking, no, go look closely at what he's being convicted of. It's essentially as you described it.
Was someone who has the resources that Sean Diddy Combs has, right, financially, right, and can assemble a tremendous legal team. I mean, is it, because he was charged with some serious stuff here. But is he
very much so? Life in jail potentially.
Life in jail. Is it a question of if you got so much legal firepower that you'll be able to sow that reasonable doubt no matter what?
It's a great question, Elias. It's really a great question because the Canadian and American system works differently. The very best lawyers in Canada take on matters either pro bono or on legal aid rates. That's the way it works in Canada. In the States, if you don't have his money, you may be stuck with a public defender. It's a different system in Canada. Do I think his high-powered legal team, the Garagoses and all that, make a difference? I think yes. If I don't think that, then I think, it doesn't matter who you hire as a lawyer. It always matters who you hire as a lawyer. The problem that comes to me when that question comes to me, which is a good one, is, was this the best use of the federal or state government's massive resources to go after him in this way when there are so many people doing other things that don't get this kind of prosecutorial attention? So yes, he has an advantage with his funds. I mean, $20 million going to Cassie Ventura would have paid for a lot of lawyers. But the question becomes, can anybody ever compete with the federal government? And unless you're somebody like him, it becomes a very, very telling thing to do. And here's the end of my answer, Elias, which I think your audience will appreciate. There is so much more pressure to plead guilty in the States when you have these kinds of expenditures, the state's prosecution, the 20 years in jail, the life in jail. There is an incredible amount of pressure on people charged with crimes in the U.S. to plead, and it's something that's not talked about enough.
And the other part of this is, our celebrity, someone of his status, was he targeted because of that? Like someone who does the exact same, did the exact same things, but who's not well known, would they have faced this same type of pressure from the law?
And that's exactly where I was going, because this kind of case can make a name for a district attorney. We saw it happen with Alvin Bragg, who's horrible and terrible. We saw it happen with Letitia James, horrible and terrible, and possibly, on certain allegations, a criminal herself. These are how people elevate themselves into the pantheon of politics and name brands. That doesn't happen in Canada. Crown prosecutors here are not looking for the limelight and press conferences. They're ministers of justice. It's a very different system there, and it's something, again, when you watch, for example, your favorite Netflix show, you'll watch a DA who gets their hooks into a celebrity, and all of a sudden now they're running for Congress. There's something very odious about a system where politics can be the basis for decisions or somebody's fame or fortune, as opposed to going after the people that are truly evil, doing things in darkness. Puff Daddy, or whatever you want to call him today, he wasn't hiding anything he was doing. There were hundreds of people there. There's something different about that and the resources to that than some underground trafficking network of teenagers.
This is the thing. Like, I'm thinking these stories. Oh, these what were they called? Freak-off parties? Freak-offs. And like every other celebrity is there. I'm like, what is going on in the music industry?
And here's the thing, Elias. Remember, Elias, adults. Adults.
Yeah. Okay, Ari, listen, lots to ponder as we find out what the sentencing will be. I want to thank you for coming on.
Good to talk to you.
Ari Goldkind, criminal lawyer and legal expert.